Hi.
Good morning.
I'm so happy to have you here today and to be able
Oh,
to spend a few minutes with you.
thank you. It's
Um,
an honor. Mm.
so June Miller, I did a little research about you. Wow.
Well, I haven't been sitting still for very long.
No, you've been on the Today Show. You've been featured in the New York Times. You've been on Good Morning America. You
Yep.
have um, spoken to thousands of people at a time with Dr. Wayne Dyer and Shakti Gawain. I used to love her
Oh
books.
my God. Her creative visualization book was one of my very first windows into what the fuck? You mean I can create my own reality? You mean you mean I can actually do something about it? She's,
Yes.
sometimes it's those basic beliefs, the simple, most basic internal conversations that we have with ourselves about what's possible that actually create what shows up. And I think with Shakti Gawain, that was, I think, back in the 80s, it was very much, she had created a small workshop and she wrote this little handbook just as something to give the participants in her groups. And it became a bestseller because as people started trying on the power of their own imaginations and the impact that you can create by simply putting energy into a thought. And there are some people who, there are some people who consider that a thought form. So that when you have a thought and you put energy into it, it has its own life. It has its own agenda.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know, I used a lot of that material to get where I am. Thoughts are things, they're fucking strong as fuck. I mean,
Yes, they are. Yes,
yeah.
they are. I have had experience, my own experiences that everybody has. We've all had something in mind and cherished that and followed it. And then one day you look around, you're kind of like,
What? What?
yeah. So
True.
today we're talking about from handmaid to heroine. And so to begin, when you hear the term uh, handmaid in terms of, in terms of spirituality,
Mm.
what comes to you, especially with your experience in the early years, because you weren't always um, this liberated, co-creating,
Yeah, it's hard to find
radiant
words.
person.
Look, all I know is for whatever reason, I always felt different. I was, I felt like I was raised different in my family. I felt like my mother, my father, and my sister had one way of looking at things. And then there was June. And so, there was always this, oh, June, like, what is she doing now? Like, oh, June. And, all I know is I, from very early on, I was never somebody who really liked sitting down. And so school was very hard because you have to sit there all day. And so back in, I was born really a long time ago when there was no ADHD. When I was high school, there was no term called that. So they called it abnormally hyperactive. But I do know that as life went on and, I got out of high school and started just doing life, that I knew that school wasn't for me. And what was I going to do for a living? And I couldn't find my purpose, but I did notice that no matter where I went, there would be people circled around me listening to whatever it was I was talking about. And what interested me the most was trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I was kind of seen as a problem. Um, Spirituality wasn't a coffee table conversation in the 70s and 60s and 50s. And I was graduated from high school in 1973 and kind of took off to try to figure out who am I? Why me? Why was I always was born different. I had weird things happening to me since I was really young and not very many people to talk to about it. And then when you did talk to people about it, it would scare them because it was quite unusual. I have a real affinity with white light. And I always have. I was just born this way. And so I think that the affinity with the white light and working with that energy is what helped create this access that I have to the invisible world, being able to download or just to ask a question and get an answer in my head instead of in a book. So I tended to lean towards spirituality, but it wasn't that I was growing up to be that. It's that I was growing up to be me. And that what I noticed is that as a person gets better at being who they are, you by definition are spiritual, because you are
Yes.
spirit and you are connecting to something bigger than yourself. And as we get to, as we get good at listening, our own intuition, our own inner guidance, our inner voices, really track where we are and where we're going, and will feed us information constantly. And they'll use a language that we might not be used to, but if we learn to listen to it, we can know when to move forward, or really feel into, whoa, time to retreat, which is very different than isolating. But, you got to listen.
So that brings up a number of questions. It's I'd like to know what you think about this, but it's my observation that in terms of being a handmaid, in terms of spirituality, normally one's brought up into a worldview where you have to get rules from the outside in. There's some external authority who's more qualified than you are to speak to your own heart and well-being and purpose in the world. And normally it's a very small purpose, a very small defined purpose. Did you have any experience with that early on?
Okay, well, see, that's a double-edged sword right there, for me, because I had my own experiences, but they didn't match the experiences I was having when I go to church.
Well, can
So
you say more about that?
yeah, okay. So my parents are Baptist. They were really Southern Baptist. So we were raised going to Sunday school and Protestant, the youth camp in the summers, and we were very involved. My sister and I were. My parents not so much, but that, I think, gave them a place to put us while they could be alone. I think back then that was, I don't know. I mean, I try to figure it out, but they were very much believers in the Baptist religion. But at the same time, it wasn't so strict to where, you couldn't dance, for example. You could still
Okay.
dance, but you had to, but at the same time, you had to wear your shirts buttoned up, and you don't curse, and you don't do this, and you don't do that. And fuck it. But but this is what I this is what I realized when I
That's fabulous.
when I went from doing what they wanted me to do, which I have no problem with that. I thought it wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything. It was like they took me to church and dropped me off, or send me to Wednesday after school. You had Bible camp or whatever. I think I was the kid who snuck out and went and smoked cigarettes under the back wing, when nobody was looking. I wasn't really listening that much. And the reason why I wasn't really listening is because my own experience didn't match what they were teaching me.
Right. And you trusted that.
Well, because I came in this way, I had this affinity with it already. There was never a question that God wasn't my best friend, because we would fucking chill. And he could give a fuck if I went to church.
Right.
He never said anything bad to me. It was always very, very present for me. It was always very, I am here. There was no sense of authority, as though I am here, and if you don't adhere to what I want, you are bad. It was, I am here and I love you. Full stop. So I started realizing that, wait a minute, all this stuff that I'm reading, wait, God will punish you if you blah, blah, blah. God's not punishing for me. I had my own experience. So it didn't match. So I took religion as, I didn't take it that serious. It was something I had to do. But the thing that I did take away from all of that was my relationship with God, and my relationship with my own higher power. And I just believe that every one of us is blessed. And there are plenty of people that live places in the world where there aren't churches. They go out and they drum on, they just take a little wooden spoon and a pot and pan, and they start singing their gospel music to the beach. There is no church. There is no, and so at the same time, like, I respect the landmark. There's many churches I've been in that I just go in and I go, whoa, thanks God. Like, I could feel it. And then
Right.
I got to say, there are some that not so much,
Yes.
So it's really not about the place. And it's not, for me anyway, it wasn't about the religion. It was about the relationship with the highest form of self-expression that there is, which is God. So
Have
that,
you, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Um, so it sounds to me like you never really got, um, like they tried to indoctrinate you, but you're kind of going, I have my own experience and you trusted it. Like,
Exactly right.
what would you say to somebody who was brought up in something like that, or they married into it, or for whatever reason, it got a hold of them, and they're seeing the red flags of this externalized authority of kind of violating their own
Mm,
soul,
yeah.
to follow rules so they can be pleasing. And a lot of times they've had narcissistic parents, and so it's just that's the
Hmm.
easiest pathway. What would you say to somebody like that, just to, if they're on the edge and they're kind of going, this is horrible. I know it's sick, but I'm
I
so
have clients like
terrified.
this. I say stuff. I have some. I mean, look, this is the thing. There's all kinds of people in the world, and there's no one way for anybody. But
Right.
when you are born into it, and when your family induces you into this kind of way of being that's contrary to who you really are, as that person gets older, there will be conflict. There will
Mm-hmm.
be an eternal tug of war. One, because okay, I don't want to disappoint my mom. She loved me, and I love her. But at the same time, that just doesn't fucking work for me. You know what I mean? And most of the time, it's because we are evolving, and we are meant to evolve. We are born to evolve. And what comes with that evolving is a certain sense of self-worth. And what comes from that is an unapologetic way of being. Like you just show the fuck up. You're not pleasing anybody. You're just being you,
Right.
right? And so what comes with that, you know, when you meet people who do recognize that there's a difference between the way that they were raised and what's actually true for them. So what I do is I encourage people to go deep. Let's go look at it. Let's see what is
Mm-hmm.
true for you.
Mm-hmm.
If we do, and all of us at some point have to recognize that we have been conditioned. In this case, we're talking about religion, but it can be conditioned around money, conditioned around relationships, conditioned around, the weather, for fuck's sake. It's like, really, there's got to be a time where we have to see what is true for us. We have to find a way to look at our own self. And in doing that, we recognize, well, hold on a minute. I'm the bomb. Like, you know what I mean? I got this right, and what other people say might be true for them, but it's not true for me,
Right.
you know? And so where somebody else might have said, Junior, you're too hyper, somebody else is saying, here, come over here and do this with me. It's like, wait, I'm going to move in the direction of where I'm invited.
Mm-hmm.
And the one place that we are always open to
Mm-hmm.
is, or where we have the choice to be open to and open for, is connection.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we know that we're connecting happens, you can measure it in your body.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to feel it where you know that you're a part of something bigger. And then what happens is, as we get better at being ourselves, we get better at enjoying all of the gifts of our inner hearing, our the way that we can listen, our inner vision, the way that we you can walk into a room and see it before it's ever been decorated. Like, I love to do houses, just as a project, but it's because of that vision, this inner knowing. You know how sometimes the phone will ring and before you pick it up, you know who it is. Inner knowing. And so what's gotten in the way of that sometimes is this conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have a client who has been, coming out of a Jehovah's Witness family, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who I think would be a great guest on this podcast, he is, he has had to suffer a great deal in order to it's kind of like investigate his inner workings to
Yes.
determine who he really is, so he can be
Yes.
in the world. He didn't know how to be in relationships. He didn't know how to change jobs, because heaven forbid if he failed. Like, it's like we get so scared to take a risk that we might
Mm.
disappoint someone, but in
Yes.
fact we're disappointing ourselves, because
Right.
we're not going anywhere. And then we're complaining about it.
Exactly. Exactly. When just real briefly, when I found my way out of a religious cult in 2004, one of the things that made it easier for me because I mean, I'd been seeing the red flags. Um, but there was that desperate fear of disappointing
Mm.
uh, the idea I had about the divine at the time. And it's just an idea.
Yeah.
And it for me, I went to an online community and there were all these people, and it's like, okay, so your house hasn't been struck with lightning and your kids are doing fine. Yes, I'm out. I mean, it wasn't quite that easy, but it was just there's a
Yeah.
lot of times there's so much fear around um gosh, God getting them. It's like God's going to get you because
See,
you're not under this tiny little roof with these very human people and their rules. What would
yeah,
you
but
have to say to
we
that?
forget that, God is in some ways always going to be made up.
Yes.
And what you, again, it's your imagination. What you believe to be true is going to be true for you.
Hmm.
And so, my God wasn't a punishing God.
Mm.
My God is love. And I lead with love. I mean, I always have. And it's because I think that, that's the most natural way to be in the world.
Hmm.
And, I don't think we're supposed to have beautiful days every day. I really do think it's okay that it's fucked up sometimes. I mean, the contrast, it shows us how far we've come, you know, in just the same way that some people want to deny the dark or deny the parts of them that are flawed.
Right.
Fuck that. Be flawed. Fuck it.
Right.
Like live in the dark. Live, be
Right.
who you are. The goal isn't to be perfect. I really don't think so. I think
Absolutely.
it's overrated, and I think it's a fucking setup. I
Right.
think the goal is to be who you are. Because
Yes.
when you're good at that, I mean, this is the genius thing of all of that. If you do stuff that gets you to look at who you are and you start seeing the badass and you start creating meaning around the things in your life that that allow for opening, allow for success, allow for just being received well, like the simple things even, when you set that up from the beginning, you start to realize that you're not alone. You are never alone.
No.
And so how you define that is going to be up to you. You're going to find the words to describe your experience in a way that's either going to be good or bad. And there's only positive or negative. We're not talking neutral. Every thought you think is either going to be positive or it's going to be negative, one or the other. So you start looking at what makes you you, and you
Hmm.
start accumulating conversations with yourself that give you a pass, that give you a capacity to be okay rather than keep punishing yourself for what you didn't get right. And
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that keeps us from getting what we want in our lives is our own personal shame.
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to religion, with the families that I know, like this guy that I know who was really raised really, really, really Jehovah's Witness, is
Hmm.
pretty strong to be, so I'm sure there's other people who have different variations of the same,
Of
but
course.
he was robbed of his capacity to feel his own feelings, to
Hmm.
manage his own thoughts.
Hmm.
I think parents don't realize that sometimes we do that. We undermine somebody's ability to have their own expression,
Yes.
and by forcing religion, that's one way that we do that. How about you decide what's true for you?
Yes. Or when my kids were coming up, it was even though we were religious at the time, I kind of really my whole deal was it's like there's this divine spark in every person who's born, and it and if you want to think about it like plants, it's like they're a different sort of creature.
Mhm.
And so my job as a parent was to figure out, okay, what do we have here? Like, is it one of these? Like, what are
Right.
we working with? And then to try and provide the atmosphere, the environment, the nourishment that would nourish what they already are, what they already were, instead of I'm going to make you into one of these. This is what you are. These are the rules. Here's the container. You must be this or you're a horrible person.
Right.
And just very much yeah, just doing what I could to help them expand into who they really were, because I think that's the highest expression. Um,
God, I kudos, fist bump to you, man, because when I was raising my kids, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I'm like, what are like, who, wait, what? Um, some of the things that some of the things I even teach now, I didn't do then. I
Well, how
didn't
could
know
you?
how to be present with my kids.
How
I
could
didn't
you?
know what it meant. I just thought I had to take care of them, put food in their mouth, and put clothes on them and drive them to school, or where they, I wasn't as conscious then as I have become. And I'm older now, so I've really learned the most important thing for all of us, and we get it now with our friends, is presence. Somebody who will just look right at us and really mean it, like, how no, but how are you?
Mhm.
But really, how are you? And to be able to have people who we can say, you know what, I'm scared right now. I'm really scared. Or, I've got all these people around me and I'm lonely. It's just that we don't often find ourselves in those conversations, partly because we haven't created the conditions for them to surface. We've
Mhm.
either repressed so much of who we are that we're kind of negotiating constantly in our back of our mind. Do I say it? Do I not say it? Am I going to look like a fool? I'm going to be stupid. Should I, and we don't trust ourselves enough, you know? We're still in the, doubting place of, maybe my parents were right. Maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I shouldn't have done that thing in high school because now, oh shit, I'm going to be punished. It's just, there's this whole thing that we do as we get older, where we start to realize all the ways in which we apologize. When we walk in
Mhm.
the room, we're saying, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Or we say, hi, you know, and I think that's a great way to think about it. Who, who are you walking in the room as? When you walk in a room, what's true for you?
Mm.
And how do you want to show up? Because, I could package it and never say fuck, but that wouldn't be me.
No, it wouldn't be any fun.
It wouldn't be authentic, So it really is self reflection really gets you to a place where you can start to see what you have to let go of that's not yours. And sometimes in religion, letting go of the fact that you will be punished if you don't do it a particular way, let that shit go.
Yes. Yeah, it's like there's no. I've talked to lots and lots of people. I've been studying cult dynamics since I got out in 2004, and
Mm,
there's this almost universal, something really bad's gonna happen to you if you leave this tiny little group of whatever. And it's so, yeah, and I love what you're saying about getting really in a nurturing, non-judgmental way, an affectionate way,
mm,
getting present with yourself.
mhm.
It's just like, okay, okay. And maybe looking at the shadow and going,
Yeah.
I
You know,
fucking see you. But like, yeah. And just, I think that's a great place to start is
yeah, I think
self-acceptance.
too, we forget how complex it is to know oneself,
Oh
because
my God.
there are so many layers to us. But I will say this, the thing to start is, I think one way to start is by asking yourself, who am I?
Mm,
And noticing that whatever answer comes in, it's so not it, right? Whatever comes in, it's just going to be nothing compared to what's next. Am I mother? Yes. Am I what? Am I this? Am I that? Yes, yes, yes. But really, there's the person inside of you who's talking to you. And then there's the person inside of you who's listening to your self-talk. So we need to get to know the good, the bad, and the ugly.
mhm,
If you were to walk up to a mirror and imagine that the person looking at you was somebody who just walked down the street and just was standing right in front of you and looking right into your eyes, you'd want to get to know that person. You'd want to get to know them. One way to do that is you cover up one eye and you look at the person who's looking at you through that one eye. And as you're doing that, if you're at all spiritual and can at all quiet your mind, another conversation will start to drop in. It's kind of like, hello. And it's going to be like, whoa, hi. And that person who's looking at you will start to kind of feed you information.
mm,
You can
mm.
ask them, where are you from? Where have you been? What are you up to? And you're going to be surprised, because in one side, you're going to get this beautiful, thank you, it's so beautiful to see you. I'm good. How are you? Then you put that hand down and cover up that eye and do the other one and say, hi, nice to meet you. It's going to be like, whoa, you're going to find one angry bitch. I mean, there is a part of us that is still a child that is scared as fuck.
Of course.
And so
Of course.
usually part of getting to know oneself, meaning going in and finding the kid who's scared or angry because you didn't protect them or for whatever reason they have,
Yeah.
and you bring them close. And it might take a week, it might take a day, it might take an hour, it might take a year.
Yeah.
But it really is blending the self. This happens as we let go of shame. See, the little kid's usually angry at something that we did or didn't do. We should have told somebody, we should have stopped it, we should have. So
How can a 5-year-old really, like, the judgments tend to be so harsh. How can a 5-year-old really stand up to their parents and go, and
Yeah.
not get beaten down?
And well, also, we don't even have the reasoning sometimes to do that at 5. We just have the reasoning that, oh God, if I want, I better do it right.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it wrong.
Yeah, the deck is stacked, kind of against a small child and their autonomy. But it's so cool to me that when we remember that we're grown, the decks aren't stacked against us anymore like that. And as I love inner child work for every reason.
Yeah.
I like that about it, because, and in fact, I'm sure you're familiar with some therapies where you do neural reprogramming.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
It's
fantastic.
absolutely, oh my God.
Neurolinguistic programming is one of my favorite little methods of having to rework the conversations that you have. Because it's our words that actually go into affecting what shows up next. And sometimes we don't have either we feel like we don't have the authority to think the way we think, or we've just leaned into somebody else's way of seeing. And there is something about starting to discern what's yours and what's not yours.
That's a whole story. I mean, that's a whole, and
Right? There's a
like,
whole podcast just on giving people back to themselves. Like, it's not fun.
exactly. And to me, that's what this heroine archetype does. I mean, the hero's journey, you've got, here's this dude, he's doing his thing. There's a big disruption. Life will never be the same. So suddenly he's knocked back on his feet. He's knocked back. He has to learn tools. He has to make new allies, and and then he has to reconfront it. And he might fail the first couple times, but then he's got to, with those new tools and those new allies, that new sense of self, he's got to go into a place he's never been before, and then then we're back to the next adventure. And with the heroine's journey, it's more complicated. It's the inner journey, and it's all the things that you've been talking about, that we've been talking about, that are like, it's not just as easy as I'm going to learn a new skill. I'll make new friends. And I mean, it's great, but it's very much the inner child work, the shadow work, the getting very lovingly present with yourself. What a concept.
Got to love the part of you that hates you.
Oh, I love the way you frame that. Because for most people, especially people who've been in the heroine archetype, the handmaid archetype, some of them were, most times they're born into it, but sometimes they are they marry into something, or they move, and they're in this very cloistered community where everybody does a certain thing, and suddenly they find themselves going with the flow to make friends, but they've kind of left a piece of themselves, an authentic piece of themselves, way behind. And it's like, how do I recover this?
Yeah. Well, partly you have to find, usually when that happens, that person starts to isolate.
Why wouldn't they?
So, first it's just convincing yourself that sometimes it really starts with a very simple thing, which is just telling yourself that you're okay. That starts even with that little conversation with that little bitty person in there that doesn't want to come and sit on your lap, that you've got to coax her or coax him and say, look, dude, I know it sucked, but it's okay. You're okay. And at a ground level, when we can first just get the baseline, you mean I'm not fucked up? If we could just get the baseline, then it starts to crack the window open, and then we start to see the light, and then we start to see ourselves. And we don't have to be perfect. We can be in a bad mood. We can be, cranky. We can be you know, tall, short, fat, skinny, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. It's just the authenticity piece
Mm.
where you can see yourself and say, oh, I actually am okay. I really am.
I love that.
It starts simple,
I
really
love
does.
that. So
Yeah.
that um, gives people an actionable something, if especially if they feel like they're kind of stuffed in this handmade role and they don't know how to find their way out. They've got a whole mountain of things to figure out, and it's intensely uncomfortable. Um, that feels like a really good starting place. It's
You
just
know, when we don't have to control, we can receive. And for a lot of people who are coming out of a handmade situation, they have been controlled. And do you know what happens when a person starts to genuinely see themselves? They tap into this freedom to be themselves, which in fact leads to the power to be themselves.
mm,
Now, what
mm.
happens with that is that the power to be yourself has nothing to do with control. It has everything to do with receiving.
Will you say more about that? Because that sounds, I the feminine divine probably needs to come up in this conversation.
I guess it does, you know, because you know, we have a right side and a left side. We have a male and a female, every one of us, you know, and the right is always your, well, for right-handed people, it represents the will. It's the male energy. It's the you know, you go for it. And the female on the left side is more the spirit energy. That's very much the receptive. That's letting yourself have what you want. This is going out and getting it. This is
Right.
letting yourself have it. So
Yeah.
it's very, very, you know, the end result, I think for life itself comes from nourishment.
Mm,
And nourishment comes from the ground. It comes from the Mother Earth. And in our own mothers, as we were fed, some children were fed by their mothers, you know, it's very much trusting energy. It's the foundation for you. Your
mm,
foundation is going to rest in your capacity to trust. It's
mhm.
what gives you the impetus to jump, to take a risk, to speak up when you might not, but it's also the drive that gets you to say, no, boundary. This is a boundary now. I'm not doing that anymore. That
Right.
doesn't work for me. That might work for you, but no. And the other value of that boundary is that's not mine. You just projected your stuff on me. And I love you, but I'm going to give it right back because
Right.
it's not mine. You
Right.
know?
Return to sender.
Yeah,
You know?
return to sender. Yeah, no, it's knowing, you know, it's, you know, the beauty of knowing yourself and knowing that you don't have to be perfect, that you're not perfect, that you can be a bitch and you can be a beauty, you can be all of it. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to work so hard. You don't have
God,
to try anymore,
yes.
you know,
There's no role to play.
because there's no
There's no
goodness.
mask to wear or role to play. It's like I'm doing me. Now, obviously, we might be doing a specific activity in Pilates class.
Yep.
I dress a little differently.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a choice.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's there's so much more energy available.
Mm,
And one thing I like to uh, think about in terms of when I know I'm in that place is, and I'd like to know how this works for you. I feel it very much in my body. I feel the rightness of something or the in my body, and I trust that.
mm. Well, you know, that's good because your body is actually a map to your consciousness because your
I love
consciousness
that.
lives through your whole body. And so for people who do healing, you know, I did healing, energy work, energy medicine. That's what my, you know, my early, when I was working with Wayne Dyer, and that's why I was leading groups on energy medicine. Your body is a map to your consciousness, and things do resonate. We recognize when we hear something that's true, we recognize that it feels different in our body than when we hear something that we know that's bullshit. Right. So people already have been listening to their body, but not even knowing what's going on. But in
Mm-hmm.
illness, every time somebody gets sick, or if you drop a sewing machine on your right foot instead of your left foot, I mean, this is all related to consciousness, and it's related to tension in the consciousness specifically. So in working with energy medicine, I understood that depending on the part of your body that's affected, that you feel the symptoms, is related to something to do with in your life. And you can always pretty much change something in your life as a way of changing something in your body. You see, people don't realize you get a sore throat and we run to get some chloroseptic and take some Advil and try to gargle with hot salt water. When in fact, if you just would deliver the communication that you've been holding back, your sore throat would heal itself like in really minutes. It's remarkable when you start to use the body as a map to the consciousness, and you start to understand that it's a language. Your body is speaking a language. And when you learn how to listen to it, you'll straighten up, you'll get on the path, because the universe will wake you up. It will do whatever it can to get your attention. And if you fall off a ladder, or if you get in a car accident, or, like, wake up. There's something trying to get your attention. It's time to change course.
Yes.
Take a risk, or to, speak up, to, to be more true to yourself.
I love that. A map to consciousness.
Your body is a map to your consciousness.
I
And
love that.
Have you work? The parts of your body that don't work reflect the parts of your life that work or don't work. So
have you written, that's a book title. That's the title to something. Have you written a book?
oh gosh, so this is a funny thing. I have a weird relationship to books.
Okay.
I like I said, I got out of high school. I graduated high school and took off and started living my life. And gosh, I've written a few things that I've got on my computer that I've never shown anyone. But what I did feel, because I don't read books, and look, I'm not a specialist of anything but me. I can show you I know how I got here, because we lived in very simple means. My father was in the military. We lived on base housing or in trailers, and we had a really nice, they did well. We didn't have very much, but there was plenty. And I forgot what I was talking about. Oh God, I went to see my father for a second. He just popped right in.
Interesting.
I know.
I'm just saying, maybe that's just so crucial. It just feels like it encapsulates. It's such a huge, wonderful frame about the body being a map for our consciousness. Like, that's just
I mean,
humongous.
there's certain illnesses that when, I worked in that field for many, many years. And so I started to see these patterns that would happen with people. And my not specialty, the thing that I ended up doing for probably 10 years was working with cancer, people who had cancer. And what I started noticing, and then AIDS was a big thing in the 80s when I was energy medicine stuff. So what I started noticing was different patterns that go with different things. So somebody who had cancer, we could always go in and find the unexpressed anger. Yeah, oh my God, it's incredible. But what happens is this: the body, the tension will show up in the area in which there's the out of balance thinking, right?
Oh my.
So like if somebody has breast cancer, it would be very different than somebody's dealing with uterine cancer. So we'd really start to drill down to what was the basic belief, what was the basic conversation that you had when some trauma happened that caused the tension that's showing up all these years later. And you can often find it, you can pinpoint it. And what would help people get healed themselves wasn't just the hoobie-dooby energy work. I mean, that's cool. Yeah, but what's really effective is getting to the core of where the tension in the consciousness began. And yeah, where people get well. That's where tumors. That's where it's because, when our body needs to get our attention, it will. When the conditions are no longer there for, if we heal the thing, in our lives that is causing the thing in our bodies, the body will catch up. I use the sore throat just because it's something simple that everybody can relate to.
Right.
But there have been plenty of people with tumors the size of a grapefruit who have shrunk. The tumor will shrink quickly, very quickly. I remember in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a young kid who had healed himself I know they didn't call it that then. That there was all this is at the University of Texas, I believe. And it was all this commotion about this kid who they were treating for this really bad, rare kind of brain cancer or something. And the cancer just disappeared. It didn't only go into remission. They had no sign to show. And he was like a 9-year-old kid or something. It was like maybe even younger, but it was like nobody could explain this. And this is why it made the news back then, because it was so unusual.
Yeah.
And the kid said, "Oh, that's easy. I just imagine," because it was right when the Pac-Man thing came out.
Yeah. The one. Yeah.
So, yeah. So he said, "I just imagined that the Pac-Man was eating all the cancer."
Woo!
And
Such a pure
every
imagination.
day I would just lay there and imagine the Pac-Man was eating cancer. So what we believe to be true actually becomes true.
Yes.
And so when it comes to using the body as a map to the consciousness, you just use it as a map. It will point you in the direction, but you still have to do the work.
Right.
You know,
and have the courage to feel your feelings.
Things and to confront the people who you've held in all the anger about, or we have to be able to have a release as well. Self-hate isn't actually accurate, but we do it. I mean, it's not hate. I wouldn't say hate is the right word, but we go there. We go to that place sometimes of really disgust with ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's to find a way to balance that and say, okay, yeah, that's actually true sometimes. I'm not so happy with that. But you know what? Look what I did here. Look what just showed up.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's in the giving. Not most people, a lot of people give so that they can get something, right? Like,
right.
Can I make you this cake? And now do you love me? And so and we know the difference when somebody's given to get versus somebody who's just like, here, have some more. You want some more? Here. And so it resonates in the receiver, right? But it shows up in the giver in the way in which the outcome is. Are they disappointed? Did they not get something back? Giving to give, you get everything you ever wanted and more back. Giving to get, you're going to get a little disappointed sometimes. It's just, it's also starting to really identify these subtleties and be very discerning, because we're not very discerning. We think if we're givers, we should give to everybody. Be fucking choosy, man.
Right.
Just discernment.
Right.
I learned that because in my field, I work with people one-on-one and in groups. And, I had my teacher say to me one time, I had brought him somebody from Peru who was a nutcase. And he said to me, "June, thanks, but it's time for discernment." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Look, you think you can help everybody, and you probably can, but why don't you pick the ones who are going to go out to make a bigger difference in the world?"
I mean to tell you. Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
Right? It's true.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, I believe it's an investment. It's like, if you treat energy like money, it's like, where's a good investment? Where's this gonna?
It's a resource.
Yeah.
It's a resource.
Yeah.
And it's a whole world right now of cryptocurrency, and that we're always looking for money, but it's paper, or it's a number on a piece of paper. It's in the computer. It's not even in our hands.
Right.
But it's a resource. So we can say same thing about energy. It's not like we can touch it right now, but it exists. And if you have any question about whether it exists, this works for 100% of the people. You can put your hands together and just hold them there for a few minutes or a minute. And as soon as you start to move them away and then move them back together, you're very clear that there is something more dense going on that wasn't as obvious.
Yes. So, it's almost like viscous, like you can just feel it. You feel it. You feel the,
right?
Okay.
Same thing about God, right?
Yes.
Same thing about it. Resources are something that is always there. It's never not there. God is never not there. Money is never not there. It's always there. It may not be in your hands right now, but if you see it as coming, then you'll spend what you have because there's more coming. And then the universe says, "Oh, look, she trusts. Here, have some more."
Yes.
But if you're like grabby, "Oh shit, I don't have very much. I better not donate to that. I better not share that. I better not give that. I better get a chintzy gift instead of a good. I better," then what you have is just what you have.
Right. And it closes up the pipeline.
Well, the universe says, "Oh, sticky." And we have reasons for that. I mean, we have real fear. We have real evidence that, but if I spend my money, I won't have any more. But that also comes with everything starts in the mind. Healing starts in the mind. Money starts in the mind. Resources are resources, whether it's time, money, energy. I mean, there is no measure. We keep trying to measure something that is really just called available. How good are you at receiving it? You want to live in abundance? Fucking prove it. And the way, you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of people I know who are wealthy as fuck, but they're
Right.
stingy, stingy, stingy.
Yes.
Wouldn't even spend money on their own father. You know,
Yes.
I know some people like this.
Yes.
There are also people who have nothing, who will give you.
Yes.
So it's not about the measurement. It's not about a number that creates abundance. Abundance is a way of being.
Mhm.
You either come from there or you don't. And in the same way, there's either a negative thought or a positive thought.
Mhm.
You're either coming from abundance or you're coming from
Mhm.
scarcity.
You just said a lot.
I did. It
You
happened.
did.
Yeah,
Like
I did that.
in that frame, for this framework of handmade to heroine, the conception of God, the divine, as abundance, or
Scarcity.
that's huge. And that's something I think people can take away with them. It's like, well, is this meanie pants constrictive idea of God even real?
Well, this goes back to basic beliefs.
Mm,
What you believe to be true will be true for you. But you know what? Like
yes.
that, you can change your fucking mind. Like that.
Have you heard? I'm sure you've heard about this, but when I first heard about it, it blew my mind. Um, in the area of what you really believe and spirituality, and about like witch doctors far away putting a on somebody, and then them freaking out because they're like, oh no, this witch doctor did a on me, and actually freaking out so much that they did drop dead because they believed so much that in the nah.
Well, you know what? This is a funny kind of, not funny, but creepy. This is a story that's going to bring that home for you. Okay, I was at the United Nations for an event right before the turning of the 2000, right in 1999, and everybody was just afraid of the currency is going to go crazy, and what are
Y2K.
we going to do? But I was following a guru at the time named and just he had been invited to. We'd been invited to a talk that Satchidananda, this major guru, was giving, and in that talk, and just luckily, just because I was with who I was with, we were in the front row, kind of. We were right in the very beginning, right in the front. And I was just blown away already just to be in this presence of all these high beings. But the talk that this guy gave and the conversation that he had with us left us dumbfounded, because this is a man of high, he's very highly respected. So he was saying things, though, that most people would think that's unbelievable. That could never have happened. And if it wasn't him doing the talking, I would have also questioned what he was saying. But
Sure.
he spoke about a time in India where, as one of the choices for the death penalty, they gave this young man the choice between this or that, and that was that he could have his wrist slit and sit in a chair, have his wrist slit, and have the blood drip out. And eventually he would lose so much blood that he would lose consciousness, but it would not be painful. And then he would just have a pleasant death. And that was one of the options that he took. And the guru said that he was as the bad guy, whatever, as the guy who was going to be sent to death penalty, was sat in the chair. They showed him the whole thing about, the table with the scalpel, and there was a bucket there, and there's his hand would be tied like this, and he'd seen all of it. And they showed him what was going to happen, and then they blindfolded him. And there were several people watching. And when they went to, after he was blindfolded, and they said, okay, now we're going to begin, instead of actually cutting his wrist, they just pretended to cut the wrist, and they dripped water into the bucket. They held his hand and they put a bottle that just dripped water into the bucket. He passed away. He
I believe
believed
it.
that he was dying, and then he died. So to have heard that from somebody of such stature, it hit home.
Yeah.
The power of our thoughts. You asked me earlier about a book, and I said I haven't written a book about all of this kind of stuff, but I have written a book that is out, and people can buy it on Amazon. But it's a book of rhyming children's stories for the children and the adult's inner child. And one of them, it's called Did You Think What I Thought? And it is really about this importance of using what's either going to be a negative or a positive, using the power in order to create. So using thought to actually manifest. In other words, giving thoughts an agenda so that there is an outcome that's measurable. So it's in a way, it's you think yourself into something. In the same way that you're about to take a test and you're like, oh fuck, I didn't study enough. I'm doomed. Oh shit. Versus, oh, okay, let's do this. It's a whole different thing.
It is a totally different vibe.
You know, our thoughts create the meaning making. Something happens, right? You have a car accident. Then you tell the story to your friend about the car accident, right? And then you have just made meaning. The car accident meant blah, 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 blah. Instead of, I just had a car accident. So every story that you tell, everything that ever happened and every story that you've ever told about it is still just a story. It's not what happened, it's the story of what happened.
Yes. Big distinction.
Yeah.
Huge.
That's where we go to make a
area of
difference.
growth.
We check those stories. We start looking at what are my fucking stories and how are they interfering with me getting what I want?
Yes.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it still comes down to, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Maybe even worthy to receive good things.
Yeah.
And
well, that comes next. First comes, I'm okay. Then comes, I'm a fucking badass. And then you just learn how to walk in the fucking room, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't walk in the room apologizing for walking in the room. Like, am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? Duh. Yeah. Fucking show up, man. Head held high, shoulders wide open, places to go, people to meet, things to do. And not every day will be so good. That's one of the rhymes in my book, you know? The book is called Junie Moon, Juney. Junie Moon.
Okay, Juney Moon. People can find it on Amazon.
The journey begins. Junie Moon, the journey begins. And there's 7 rhyming stories. It's part of a series. And they all, every one of them has a twist. There's always a twist. Are you who you really are? You know, these are some of the titles. Did you think what I thought? Have fun, chosen one. Why did God make mosquitoes? One of the rhymes. You know,
that is completely awesome. I'll include a link to that.
Oh, I appreciate that
in the notes. And is there any last little something that you wanted to see?
I don't know. I always say for life, people need more than they think they need. You think you need water and you think you need food. You know, you need love, but you really need boundaries. You know, you need boundaries and you need self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care, I think, is a word that in my parents' household, I think I was called selfish. And I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about selfish because you do something for yourself.
Right.
I'm talking about you do something for yourself because you're who you are and you're a fucking badass and you're a rock star and you fucking deserve it. So full stop.
Love it. Thank you very, very, very much. And people can find you on Oh June What Now?
Oh no, it's actually Oh June Now What?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
It's because it's always now what have you done? Not what are you going to do next, but now what have you done? Like, uh-oh, what is she doing now?
Okay.
Yeah, you can find me on www.ohjunenowwhat.com. And yeah, I have fun. And I think people should have fun. And I think that God wants us to have fun.
I think so.
He does me. Hopefully he does you. Let's prove it. We can have fun together. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's just been a pleasure, really. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.